All right, so today we're going to dive deep into something you might not have thought about before.
Okay.
And it's the cost of deporting just one person.
Interesting.
From the U.S. We found some really fascinating data that breaks down like the whole process.
Okay.
And honestly, the numbers are pretty surprising.
Yeah.
And luckily I have our expert here to kind of help us really understand what's going on behind all of this.
Yeah. Happy to help.
Ready to uncover.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Some surprising truths about the economics of immigration.
Absolutely. It's definitely a topic that people talk about a lot.
Yeah.
But you know, the devil's in the details when you actually break down the costs at every single stage.
Yeah.
It gets complicated and it gets expensive really fast.
So let's just start right at the beginning.
Okay.
Where does this whole deportation process even begin?
Right.
And what kind of costs are we talking about right out of the gate?
So it all starts with finding and apprehending the person, right? So that involves investigations, working with local law enforcement, and sometimes arrests directly by ICE.
Right.
All of that together can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000.
Wow.
Depending on, what's going on in the situation.
$10,000 to $12,000.
Yeah.
Just to find and detain someone?
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot more than I would have thought.
Yeah.
What makes it so expensive?
Well, there's a lot more to it than you might think.
Right.
You have to think about the personnel costs for all the agents.
Okay.
You've got travel expenses, sometimes even surveillance if the person is hard to find.
Right.
And that's all before we even get to detention.
So detention, is that where the real costs start to add up?
That's right.
Yeah. I know we have some numbers about the average daily cost.
We do.
Of just holding someone in a detention facility.
Detention is definitely where we see a big chunk of the cost.
Right.
The average daily cost is about $157 per detainee, and the average stay is 31 days.
So if my math is right, that's almost $5,000.
Yeah. For
detention alone.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that $157 per day?
It is.
Pretty standard across the board.
It's an average.
Okay.
The actual cost can be different,
Right.
depending on the facility.
Yeah.
You have to consider staffing levels.
Okay.
Security, how much security there is. Food, medical care.
Makes sense.
And for families with children or people with medical needs.
Oh, right.
The costs go up even more.
Yeah, of course.
There are separate facilities for families, and those have extra costs, for the kids and stuff.
Right.
Additional needs mean more money costs.
So we've got the initial apprehension.
Right.
Then we've got the costs for detention. But we haven't even gotten to the actual legal process yet.
Right.
What kind of expenses are we talking about for that?
Okay, so the legal process adds another whole layer of complexity and cost.
Yeah.
So once somebody is detained, they have the right to due process.
Okay.
So that means going through immigration court to see if they have any legal reason to stay in the U.S.
Like an asylum claim or something.
Exactly, like an asylum claim or other ways to avoid being removed.
So we're talking court hearings.
Yeah.
Lawyers. Does everybody in this situation
good question.
have a lawyer?
Not always.
Really?
They have the right to a lawyer,
okay,
but they don't automatically get one.
Wow.
So a lot of them have to rely on free legal help or represent themselves, which is really hard with immigration law.
Yeah.
I bet.
It's complicated.
So these legal proceedings, how long do they usually take?
That's a hard question to answer.
Okay.
Some cases are done pretty quickly.
Okay.
Others can go on for years.
Wow.
The immigration court system has a huge backlog.
Okay.
Over 2 million cases.
Oh, wow.
Which causes these big delays. So people are stuck in this legal limbo.
Yeah.
Often in detention.
Often, yeah.
With those daily costs just racking up.
Right, the meter's running the whole time.
So we've got the initial apprehension.
Yeah.
The detention costs. The legal battles.
Right.
But eventually, there's the actual deportation itself.
Right.
Actually getting somebody out of the country.
Right.
I imagine that costs a lot too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The cost to actually transport someone depends a lot on where they're going.
Makes sense.
To a nearby country like Mexico or Canada.
Yeah.
It can be pretty cheap.
Okay.
On average, it's around the $778.
Okay, so shorter flights.
Right.
Simpler logistics.
Exactly. Yeah. But for someone going to a country farther away, the costs can get really high.
I bet.
We might need chartered flights.
Yeah.
Lots of layovers. Really complicated travel stuff.
Oh, wow.
It can easily cost $17,000 per flight hour.
$17,000 per flight hour. Yeah, it's expensive.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Long flights get pricey.
So, okay, let's add all this up.
Yep.
We got the apprehension, detention,
Yeah.
legal fees, and then the transportation.
All of it.
What's the total cost
Yeah.
to deport just one person?
On average,
Yeah.
it's somewhere between like $14,000 and $20,000 per person.
That's a lot when you really think about it.
It is.
And that's just for one person.
One person, yeah.
What happens when you scale that up?
Right.
Like, what if we're talking about mass deportation,
Yeah.
removing millions of people from the country?
Yeah. Then the numbers get huge.
It's really big.
Like, how big are we talking?
If we're deporting, say, 1 million people a year,
Okay.
the estimated cost is something like $88 billion a year.
$88 billion.
Yeah.
That's more than the entire GDP of a lot of countries.
It's a huge amount of money.
What would it even take to actually do that?
To deport that many people,
Yeah.
it would be massive, logistically. Okay.
Like, we'd have to increase detention capacity a ton.
How much are we talking?
ICE would need 24 times more facilities
4 times.
than they have now.
Wow. So, like, we'd need to build a bunch of new detention centers
Tons of them, brand new
and hire, like, tons of staff.
Yeah, a huge number of new staff.
Wow. And figure out how to manage all those people.
Exactly. Logistics would be insane.
Yeah, how much would all that construction even cost?
Billions just for the buildings.
Wow.
And the courts would be totally overwhelmed too.
Oh, right.
Like,
Yeah.
you'd need way more immigration courts and judges
Yeah.
to handle all those new cases.
Yeah.
It would be crazy.
For sure.
An already backlogged system would just be crushed.
So let's talk about that.
Oh.
We've talked a lot about, like, the direct costs of
Yeah.
deportation.
Uh-huh.
But what about, like,
Yeah.
the broader economic impact? What would mass deportation
Right.
do to the U.S. economy?
There are a lot of potential consequences.
That affect a lot of different parts of the economy.
Okay.
One of the biggest things to worry about
Yeah.
is disruption to the labor market.
Okay.
Undocumented immigrants,
Yeah.
they're a big part of the workforce
Okay.
in some industries,
Like, what kind of industries?
especially agriculture
Right.
and construction.
So removing like millions of workers from those industries
Yeah.
would cause like labor shortages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We could see businesses really struggling to find workers.
Uh-huh.
Projects would be delayed or even canceled.
Right.
And prices for consumers could even go up.
Right.
Because things would cost more to make.
Wow. And that's not even just those industries.
It's not just those.
There's also lost tax revenue, right?
Exactly.
Undocumented immigrants do pay taxes, right?
They do. They pay billions of dollars in taxes every year.
Wow.
Through payroll taxes and sales taxes.
So if you remove a bunch of taxpayers,
Yeah.
that would really hurt government revenue.
It would.
So it's not as simple as
No,
just removing people from the country.
it's not.
There are like real economic consequences too.
Absolutely.
And we haven't even mentioned the
Right.
strain on law enforcement.
Yeah, that too.
If we made mass deportation like the priority,
Yeah.
that would mean taking resources away from
That's it.
other things,
Yeah.
right? Like criminal investigations,
Mhm.
counterterrorism,
Yeah.
even border security.
It's all connected.
It's really complex
Really complex.
with a lot of moving parts.
A lot of different factors.
So it sounds like there's a lot more to this than we might think.
Yeah, definitely.
We've learned some
Yeah.
really interesting stuff today,
For sure.
but kind of sad too.
Yeah, a little bit.
What are some of the key takeaways
Yeah.
for our listeners?
Yeah, good question.
As we kind of wrap things up, it really shows like how complicated this is.
It does.
You know, it's an issue that we like to
Right.
oversimplify.
Yeah. People
Yeah.
try to make it black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's
So what's like the main takeaway here?
Okay, so
What should our listener be thinking about?
I think the biggest thing is
Yeah.
to realize that deportation, even for just one person,
Yeah.
is way more expensive and complicated than most people think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
It's not just about
Yeah.
like putting someone on a plane.
Yeah.
There's a whole system,
Right.
and every step costs money.
And when you think about it,
Yeah.
on like a mass scale,
Right.
like mass deportation.
The costs get crazy high.
Yeah.
And then you've got the logistics
Uh-huh.
and the economic problems it could cause.
Right. It makes you think about like
It does.
if that kind of policy even makes sense.
Exactly. Like, what are the costs and benefits of
Yeah.
removing so many people? People who are working, paying taxes.
Yeah. Are there better ways
Right. Are there better ways?
to deal with undocumented immigration?
Big questions.
Yeah.
Not easy answers.
Right. But knowing the costs
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
important.
It's like the first step to having a real conversation about it.
So it seems like there's just so much more to this
There is.
than we realize.
Yeah.
I think we've given our listeners
I think so.
A lot to think about.
Definitely.
Thanks for helping us understand this.
Of course.
It's so complicated.
It is.
And most people don't get it.
Yeah, a lot of misconceptions out there.
Well, the more we know about immigration, the better we can talk about it.
Exactly. We can have better conversations.
And maybe find some solutions that work for everyone.
That's the goal.
Exactly. So, to our listeners, keep learning more.
Yes, keep digging.
Read stuff.
Read different viewpoints.
Yeah, look at different perspectives.
Yeah.
And, question what you think.
Question your assumptions.
Yeah. There's always something new to learn.
Always.
Thanks for listening, everybody.